There's something most men never realize until it's too late. Silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's a weapon that cuts deeper than words ever could. When you pull back, when you stop explaining, when your voice disappears from her world, she starts to feel something she can't control. Confusion, curiosity, frustration, and that emotional storm. It's often stronger than the comfort your words used to bring. Welcome back to the channel, where we break down the real dynamics behind male and female behavior, not the sugar-coated stuff, but the psychology that actually drives connection and attraction. The topic we're unpacking today, your silence is hurting them more than you think. Sounds simple, but it's not. This isn't about ghosting or playing mind games. It's about the silent space that forms when a man who once spoke starts speaking less, not out of pride, but out of clarity. Women are emotional communicators by nature. They need verbal reassurance, emotional exchange, and signs of emotional connection. When that flow suddenly stops, it creates an imbalance in her emotional rhythm. And that imbalance, it makes her question what she thought she understood about you, about the relationship, and about herself. But here's the controversial truth. While silence can make her feel lost, it can also expose her attachment patterns, her insecurities, and her need for control. That's why your silence, when used with purpose, is both powerful and dangerous. In this video, we'll explore why your silence affects her more than you think, and what you should do to use it in a healthy, confident way without turning it into manipulation or emotional withdrawal. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll understand the psychology behind silence and how it changes everything. 1. The hidden power of silence. Most men underestimate the power that lies in their silence. They think communication always means saying more, explaining deeper, or proving a point. But in reality, silence has a psychological weight that words can never match. It's not the absence of expression, it's a message on its own. When you stop talking, stop reacting, stop over-explaining, it shifts the energy of every interaction. And the person on the receiving end, especially a woman, feels that shift immediately. It's not about arrogance or emotional withdrawal, it's about control over your energy, your emotions, and how much of yourself you give away. See, women are naturally tuned to emotional cues. They thrive on connection, conversation, and reassurance. Your silence removes that rhythm. It disrupts her emotional security, leaving her to wonder what's going on in your head. That quietness becomes an echo she tries to fill with her own thoughts, doubts, and assumptions. And the more she tries to decode your silence, the more it consumes her attention. That's the power most men overlook. You don't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is saying nothing at all. But here's where it becomes truly engaging. Silence only becomes powerful when it's intentional. When it's not used to punish or manipulate, but to regain balance. For instance, when arguments spiral or emotions run high, a man who chooses silence over shouting communicates strength and restraint. He's showing that he's not controlled by impulse, and that calmness creates an aura of stability. A trait women deeply respect, even if they don't admit it openly. However, the hidden power of silence isn't about distance. It's about presence without noise. When you can sit in silence and still hold emotional authority, it sends a clear message. You are secure within yourself. You don't need validation. You don't need to over-explain your worth. You know that silence, when used correctly, commands respect. It's not passive. It's strategic. What makes it controversial is how women often react to this. Many interpret silence as indifference, thinking you no longer care. But what's really happening is that you're removing the emotional fuel that once drove unnecessary tension. Your silence makes her face herself, her expectations, her assumptions, her reactions. And that self-confrontation can be uncomfortable, even painful. That's why silence often hurts more than confrontation. In truth, the hidden power of silence lies in emotional discipline. It teaches patience, control, and the ability to lead with presence instead of pressure. For the man who learns this balance, silence becomes a language of respect, both for himself and for the woman who's learning, through that quiet space, what your true value feels like. 2. How women process your absence. When a man goes silent, most women don't just notice it. They feel it deeply. Silence creates a kind of emotional tension that words could never achieve. The moment you stop calling, stop texting, or even stop reacting the way you used to, it triggers a powerful internal response in her. At first it starts small. She wonders if you're busy, distracted, or just giving space. But as hours turn into days, her mind starts to work overtime. She begins to question not only your feelings, but her own value in your world. This is where the psychology becomes fascinating, and for men who understand it, empowering. Women process emotional absence very differently from men. For most men, silence is peace. It's a reset button. It's a way to gather thoughts and cool down. But for women, silence feels like emotional distance, a break in connection that needs to be repaired immediately. They are emotionally wired to maintain relational flow. When that flow is interrupted, her brain interprets it as rejection. It's not always logical, but it's deeply emotional. And because emotions drive female behavior far more than logic, that absence starts to occupy her thoughts. She begins replaying old conversations, rereading messages, and questioning whether she said something wrong. In essence, she's trying to make sense of the gap you created. What makes this process so powerful is that it exposes emotional dependency. When you were available, your words and presence provided emotional certainty. But now, your silence removes that certainty, and her mind rushes to fill the void. She may become defensive, distant, or even try to provoke you into reacting. But underneath that reaction is a search for reassurance. She wants to know if she still matters. That's how deep your absence cuts. The engaging part here is that this isn't about manipulation. It's about awareness. When you understand how your absence is processed, you stop using silence as a weapon and start using it as a mirror. It shows you what the relationship is built on. Does she respect your need for space, or does she panic when you're quiet? Does she understand you're calm, or does she create chaos to get your attention back? These reactions reveal her emotional maturity more than her words ever could. And here's the twist. Sometimes, the more silent you become, the louder her emotions speak. She may act unbothered, post more online, or appear distant, but most of that is a front to hide the discomfort your absence created. Deep down, she's analyzing, overthinking, and feeling that loss of emotional rhythm. Your silence isn't invisible. It's echoing in her thoughts, forcing her to confront the imbalance she's trying to ignore. When a man learns how women process his absence, he gains emotional control without saying a word. Silence becomes more than a pause. It becomes a reflection of his strength, discipline, and value. The man who understands this doesn't chase attention. He allows his absence to remind her why his presence once mattered. 3. When silence turns into confusion. Silence can be powerful when used with balance, but when misunderstood or misused, it can easily create confusion, resentment, or emotional distance that's hard to repair. This is where most men get it wrong. They hear that silence attracts respect and start using it as a punishment or manipulation tool. But there's a difference between quiet confidence and emotional withdrawal. One builds mystery and strength. The other destroys trust and connection. Understanding that difference is what separates a wise man from a wounded one. Let's start with the wrong way. Men often use silence. Some men go completely cold when upset. They stop communicating altogether, ignoring calls, messages, or emotional cues, not to regain balance, but to make her feel guilty or desperate. This turns silence into a weapon. It's not power anymore. It's emotional punishment. And while it might make her chase you temporarily, it slowly erodes her emotional safety. Over time, she'll associate your silence with rejection, not respect. That's when she stops opening up and starts closing off. Another mistake is using silence to avoid accountability. Some men withdraw because they don't want to face difficult conversations or emotional truths. They use quiet as a shield to avoid discomfort. But here's the thing. True masculine silence isn't avoidance. It's composure. When you're silent, it should be because you're choosing clarity over chaos, not because you're running away from communication. Avoidance doesn't create peace. It only delays confrontation. And when that conversation finally happens, it's usually messier than before. Now let's look at the right way to use silence. Real masculine silence is about emotional control, not emotional distance. It's when you pause instead of reacting. It's when you allow time and space to calm tension before returning to speak with logic and calm energy. When you're quiet, not because you're dismissive, but because you value peace over drama, it earns silent respect. The right kind of silence speaks maturity. It shows you're grounded enough not to be swayed by emotion. To correct the wrong use of silence, start by being intentional with it. If you're pulling back, make sure it's to reflect, not retaliate. Communicate your boundaries calmly before stepping away. Something as simple as saying, "I need a little time to think," prevents confusion and stops your silence from being misread. Silence without context can feel like abandonment. Silence with maturity feels like leadership. Another correction is timing. Silence works best after communication, not before it. Explain your perspective first, then step back. That way, your quietness isn't seen as indifference, but as strength. When you return, do so with clarity, not coldness. In short, silence becomes confusing when it lacks purpose. Use it to build peace, not pressure. The man who learns to be quiet without disconnecting emotionally becomes the kind of man women respect, not resent. Silence should never be the wall that separates you. It should be the calm that restores connection. 4. The emotional ripple effect. Every man needs to understand this. Your silence does more than just quiet the noise. It creates a ripple that reaches deeper than you imagine. The moment you stop explaining, stop defending yourself, stop chasing clarity from someone who refuses to understand you, something powerful begins to happen. The energy shifts. You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that were slowly being lost in unnecessary words and wasted emotions. That's the beauty of emotional silence. It's not just about her reaction, it's about your evolution. Most men think they lose power when they pull back. But in truth, that's when real power begins. You start realizing that your peace matters more than winning an argument. Your calm becomes your strength, and your silence becomes your teacher. The ripple effect starts inside you first. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You start making decisions not from emotion, but from understanding. You stop chasing validation and start choosing peace. That inner stillness changes the way you move, speak, and lead. And trust me, people feel that energy long before you say a word. Now, let's talk about how your silence ripples outward. When a woman experiences your calm silence, not the cold kind, but the grounded, confident kind, it forces a new level of respect. It reminds her that you are not emotionally available on command. You are not a man to be pulled into every storm. You have the discipline to stand still when everything around you shakes. and that stillness draws her curiosity. It makes her reevaluate her approach, her tone, her expectations. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects her own behavior, her own emotional habits. That's how transformation begins, not by what you say, but by what you withhold. The ripple doesn't stop there. Your silence affects how others treat you. Friends, co-workers, even strangers begin to sense your composure. You no longer react to disrespect, you outgrow it. You no longer argue to prove your worth, you embody it. That quiet confidence is magnetic. It communicates that you are in control of yourself. And in a world where everyone wants to be heard, the man who can remain silent becomes unforgettable. Here's the motivation in all this. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's learning that not everything deserves your reaction. It's choosing to protect your energy rather than waste it. It's mastering your emotions rather than being mastered by them. When you understand the ripple effect of your silence, you stop seeking power in control and start finding it in peace. So, the next time you're tempted to argue, explain, or prove your point, pause instead. Let your silence speak. Let it ripple. Because the man who can stay calm when everything demands his reaction isn't just strong, he's rare. And in a world full of noise, rarity is what makes you unforgettable. 5. Using silence with purpose. If you truly want to understand influence, control, and emotional depth in any relationship, you must learn to use silence with purpose. Silence, when done right, is persuasion in its purest form. It's not about manipulation, it's about clarity, composure, and intention. Every man has moments when speaking less says more, when calmness speaks louder than confrontation, and when distance communicates value. The problem is, most men use silence impulsively. They shut down because they're hurt or angry. But when you use silence with purpose, it becomes your most persuasive tool. Here's the truth. Women don't respond to words as much as they respond to energy. You can talk for hours, explaining yourself, arguing your side, and trying to fix what's broken. But if your energy feels scattered or desperate, your words lose weight. Silence, on the other hand, shifts that balance instantly. It forces her to feel your absence. It makes her realize that your peace cannot be bought with pressure. That quiet composure reminds her that you're not just another man trying to be understood. You're a man who values his own presence. To use silence with purpose, you must first define why you're going silent. Are you doing it to gain emotional clarity, to protect your peace, or to allow her to reflect? When there's intention behind your quietness, it communicates differently. Purposeful silence doesn't come from pain, it comes from power. It says, I won't engage in chaos, but I'm still here. It's calm confidence that draws attention without asking for it. Now here's where it becomes persuasive. When a woman senses that your silence is self-controlled, not reactive, it creates a deep emotional contrast. She starts to question what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and why you're not reacting like every other man. That curiosity becomes attraction. She begins to realize that your validation isn't freely given. It must be earned through respect and effort. Silence makes her remember that your attention has value, and value creates desire. But persuasion isn't about playing games. It's about emotional awareness. If your silence is used to punish, it loses power. If it's used to reflect and reset, it earns respect. There's a fine line between mystery and manipulation. The difference is in your intention. When your goal is peace, not control, your silence becomes an anchor that steadies both of you. So here's the persuasive truth. When you master purposeful silence, you no longer chase validation, you create it. You don't need to demand respect, it naturally comes. Because silence, when rooted in confidence, speaks louder than any speech could. The man who knows when to speak and when to stay silent holds emotional leverage that few ever achieve. Purposeful silence doesn't just make her listen, it makes her feel. And once she feels your absence, she'll understand something most people never do. Real power doesn't shout. It whispers, and it's found in the quiet strength of a man who knows his worth. 6. Avoiding the silent punishment trap. Now, let's get into one of the most important and often misunderstood aspects of this entire concept, knowing how to avoid turning silence into punishment. Many men, once they discover how effective silence can be, begin to misuse it. They start seeing it as a strategy to gain control, make her feel guilty, or prove a point. But here's the truth. When silence turns into punishment, it stops being powerful. It becomes toxic. The difference between healthy silence and emotional punishment is understanding why and how you're using it. Let's make this clear. Silence should never come from bitterness or pride. When you go quiet out of anger or to make her suffer, you're not practicing strength, you're projecting pain. The moment your silence becomes about revenge, you lose emotional discipline. And while it might make her react in the short term, over time it creates emotional fear, not respect. Women are highly intuitive. They can feel when your silence is calm and when it's cold. When it's cold, she shuts down. She stops feeling safe. That's how relationships silently die. Not from yelling, but from emotional starvation. Educating yourself on this balance starts with emotional intelligence. Real strength isn't about how long you can stay silent. It's about what your silence communicates. Does it reflect maturity, or does it communicate distance? Silence should give both of you space to think, not space to grow apart. When used with understanding, it becomes a bridge, not a wall. It gives you time to calm your mind and gives her a chance to reflect. That's healthy silence. It repairs rather than ruins. Another key lesson is learning when to break the silence. Staying quiet forever doesn't make you powerful. It makes you disconnected. At some point, maturity means re-engaging with empathy and composure. Once emotions settle, communication must return. But it must return with clarity. Silence teaches reflection. Communication creates resolution. They work hand in hand. A man who knows when to be quiet and when to speak intelligently is emotionally balanced. Here's a practical approach. Before you go silent, make your intention known. Say something simple like, "I just need time to clear my head." This statement sets boundaries and prevents misunderstanding. She'll respect the pause because she knows it's not rejection, it's regulation. When you re-engage, speak calmly, not defensively. Use words that rebuild connection, not reignite conflict. Educating yourself on silence also means recognizing your triggers. If you're quiet because you're avoiding confrontation, you're running away. But if you're quiet because you're mastering your emotions, you're evolving. One destroys trust, the other builds it. The silent punishment trap is real, but it's avoidable. The key is self-awareness. The goal isn't to make her feel small, it's to make yourself feel centered. When you understand this balance, silence becomes a skill, a communication tool that strengthens emotional intelligence instead of weakening it. And the man who masters this never loses control. He leads with calm, wisdom, and grace. 7. Turning silence into strength. There comes a point when a man realizes that silence isn't just a reaction, it's a lifestyle. It's not about avoiding words, it's about mastering presence. When you reach that point, your silence no longer feels heavy or defensive. It becomes your strength, your peace, and your power. Every truly confident man understands this. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The calmest one usually is. Because silence, when fueled by confidence, commands attention without needing to demand it. Think about it. When you're silent, you force others to lean in. You make people, especially women, pay attention to what you don't say. That quiet energy radiates a kind of mystery that's far more powerful than constant explanation or persuasion. You no longer rush to prove your worth. You let your actions do that for you. The man who knows how to stay grounded, even in emotional storms, becomes unforgettable. His energy speaks a language that words could never express. That's what it means to turn silence into strength. It's becoming a man whose presence carries weight, even when he says nothing at all. This kind of silence comes from self-control, not ego. It's built through self-awareness, discipline, and emotional maturity. It's knowing that you don't have to respond to everything that challenges you. It's realizing that walking away doesn't mean losing. It means choosing peace over noise. When you learn to use silence as a tool for emotional mastery, you stop letting people dictate your reactions. You stop chasing closure, attention, or validation. You start choosing yourself. And that's where true masculine strength is born. Now here's where it becomes engaging. When you reach this level of emotional discipline, your energy shifts completely. People can sense it. Women especially notice it because your calm confidence sets you apart from the crowd. You become unpredictable, not because you play games, but because you're grounded. You're not easily triggered, not desperate for approval, and not afraid to be alone. That kind of man is rare, and rarity is magnetic. Your silence becomes your signature. It communicates stability, power, and control without you ever having to raise your voice. But remember, turning silence into strength doesn't mean closing your heart. It means learning when to speak from logic, not emotion. It means leading with calmness instead of chaos. When you do that, your words become more impactful because they're backed by composure, not frustration. Silence teaches you to listen better, observe more, and understand deeper. You start to recognize patterns, sense energy shifts, and respond with intention instead of impulse. In the end, silence is not weakness, it's awareness. It's the discipline to know when presence is enough. When you master this, you stop chasing power, you become it. The man who turns silence into strength doesn't just win arguments, he wins respect. Because strength isn't about noise. It's about knowing that sometimes saying nothing at all says everything. Silence, when understood and mastered, becomes more than a reaction. It becomes a reflection of strength, clarity, and self-respect. A man who knows when to speak and when to stay quiet commands respect effortlessly. His calm energy communicates power far louder than anger or argument ever could. But silence must always come from purpose, not pride. When used with balance and emotional intelligence, it builds trust, restores peace, and deepens connection. In the end, true masculinity isn't proven through noise. It's revealed in restraint. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can say is nothing at all.